I'll not fool you. I was near grown before this house ever had a refrigerator. People hear that and they picture everybody half sick on spoiled food. They've got it backwards. Ma fed 9 of us clean through a July with no power and no ice off a truck, and did it safe, because keeping food without a cold box wasn't one trick. It was 50 of them, all running at once, all the year round, and near every one is gone now. Here's the twist. Number 4 kept a whole apple orchard drinkable clear till spring in one wooden barrel. Number 9 cooled butter on a porch in August with nothing but a wet rag and a breeze, and I'll tell you honest where it quit working. And number 1 wasn't a box at all, it was a neighbor's. Let's count down 10 ways Appalachian families kept food from spoiling without a refrigerator. Number 10, cutting and keeping the ice. Before an ice truck ever ran these mountain roads, if you wanted cold in July, you went and cut it in January. That was the whole plan. You waited on the pond. When the ice made 8 inches thick and you tested it, you did not guess a thing. You'd walk out on, the men went out with a saw and an axe and scored it off in a grid, like a checkerboard drawn on the water. Then you sawed down the lines and floated the blocks to the bank with a long pole. A good block ran better than a foot square and was heavy as a sack of feed. You hauled them to the ice house, a little building set part into a north bank with a double wall, and you laid the blocks up like a mason lays stone. And here's the whole secret of it, the one thing. You packed sawdust around every block, a foot of it, over the top and down every side. They tell me sawdust is just a poor carrier of cold. It holds a world of still air in it and won't pass the cold back out to the summer. Same reason a wool coat works on a man. So that ice sat there melting so slow you'd get clear to July, August even, off one winter's cutting. Let 2 blocks touch bare though, no sawdust run between them, and they'd freeze into one and then rot a hollow, and the whole stack would slump and go to water on you by June. I spent 31 years underground, and I'll tell you an ice house has that same smell a deep mine has, that still, damp cold that doesn't move and doesn't care what month it is topside. A man named Frederick Tudor shipped New England pond ice all the way to India off this exact notion, sawdust and all, and got rich as sin doing it. Now you pull a lever on your door and never once think what it used to cost a man to have something cold in the summertime. Number 9, the wet cloth safe. Not everybody had a spring to build a spring house over. If your water came up out of a well and your summer was hot, you cooled the little things. The butter, a crock of milk, a bowl of greens, a different way, and it's a way most folks have never heard of. You'd take a small screened safe, or honestly just a bucket set down in a pan, and you'd wrap the whole of it round in a wet cloth, burlap or an old sheet, with the tail of that cloth hung down into a dish of water, so it kept itself wet all day, wicking, drinking the water up on its own. Then you set it in the shade where a breeze could get at it. Now they tell me it takes a great deal of heat to turn water into vapor, more than you'd ever think. And that heat's got to come out of something, so it comes out of whatever's inside the cloth. The drier the wind, the harder it pulls, and the cooler your butter sits. And here I'll be straight with you, because being straight is the whole of what we do here. This one never worked half so good in these mountains as it did out west. A dry desert wind will drop that box 15, 20 degrees below the air. But a wet August afternoon in a Tennessee holler, where the air is already full up with water and won't take on a drop more, you're lucky to pull a few degrees out of it, enough to keep butter from running to grease, not near enough to trust milk overnight. The people who swore by this lived where the air was dry. We used it, and we knew its limits, and I won't pretend it was more than it was. Let the cloth go dry on you, forget to keep water in that dish, and it quits cold entire, turns into a warm little tent, and does you worse than nothing. A wet rag and a breeze cost you nothing. The window unit it'd take to cool one room today runs a couple $100, and a power bill besides. Number 8, salting down the beans and the corn. Now hear me, this is not your sauerkraut, and it is not your pickled beans. Those go sour on purpose, a slow, gentle souring in a weak salt water. This is the flat opposite of that. This is salt, and a right smart of it. When the beans all came in at once, more than a body could eat fresh or string up to dry, Ma would break 'em and lay 'em down in a stone crock. A good inch of green beans, then a heavy fistful of pickling salt scattered white over the top of 'em. Then more beans, then more salt, packing it down with her hand as she went, till the crock was full to the shoulder. A plate on top and a clean rock to weight it. The salt pulled the water clean out of the beans and made its own brine right there in the crock, and that brine came up so strong nothing living could stand it. Corn cut off the cob went down the very same way. They tell me it's the same reason salt keeps a ham. Nothing rots in water that salty. There's no free water left for the spoiling to grow in. The salt's grown it all out. Skimp on that salt to save yourself a little though, and you don't preserve one thing. You just rot a whole crock of beans, slow and stinking, and lose the lot. And you could not eat them straight out of that crock. They'd near kill you, they were that salty. So come a January supper, you dipped out what you wanted, and you freshened it, soaked it in clean water, and changed that water 2-3 times across a day to draw the salt back out before it ever saw the pot. Freshen it careless, and the whole mess is too salty to swallow. Ma put down a 50-pound crock of salt beans every August of my boyhood, and never thought a thing of it. I don't know a soul under 60 who's done it once. That's the crocks and the ground handled. From here down, it's the ones that took a real hand. Cider and cheese and the like, things a body could get wrong. If you find this worth the keeping, subscribe. I put one of these up every few days. Number 7, burying the crop, the clamp. A root cellar's a fine thing if you've got one dug. A great many didn't, and even with a cellar, when you had more potatoes and turnips and cabbages than it would hold, you put the rest of 'em to bed in the ground itself. The old people called it a clamp, or a pit, or just the hill. It is not the cellar, and it is not roots buried in a box of sand in the house. It's a thing you build outdoors, in the open field, against the frost. You picked high ground that drained, never a low spot that'd hold the wet, and you laid down a thick bed of straw, better than a foot deep. You piled your roots up on it in a long mound, taters and turnips and carrots together. Then you covered the whole heap over with another foot of straw, and over that you shoveled the earth itself, 6 inches of dirt, and patted it down smooth so the rain would run off it and not soak in. And you left one little wisp of straw poking out the very top, like a chimney. That straw chimney's no accident. They tell me the roots go on breathing after they're pulled. They give off a little warmth and a little damp, and if that can't creep out the top, the whole pile sweats itself and rots. The dirt holds the steady cold of the deep ground, and the frost never reaches down through a foot of straw and earth to touch what's under it. Bury 'em in a wet spot, though, or pile 'em in green and warm from the field, or seal it up airtight with no vent at all, any one of those three, and you dig up black slime come February instead of supper. Poke it open one end of a clamp in the dead of winter, draw out a week's worth of roots, and close it back so neat you'd never know it had been robbed. Buried right, a cabbage kept crisp and sweet till spring under a foot of Tennessee mud. Number 6, curing the onions and the winter squash. Some things you don't keep by cooling them, and you don't keep by salting them. You keep 'em by drying their own skin into a armor and then leaving 'em be. It's the laziest keeping there is, and one of the surest. Onions and garlic, you pull 'em when the tops fall over and start to brown, and you do not wash 'em, and you do not rush 'em. You lay 'em out somewhere warm and dry and airy, a porch floor, a loft, for 2-3 weeks, till the necks dry down papery and pull shut tight. Then you braid the dry tops together in a rope and hang it. Kept cool and dry after that, down around 35-40 degrees, a good onion will hold clear till spring. Winter squash and pumpkins and the old cushaw are the same notion, only warmer. You cure them 10 days up near 80 degrees, to harden that rind into a shell, and then set them on a shelf in a cool room, not a cold one, and they'll go months. The dry neck and the hard rind are a seal is all. Nothing can get in to rot it, and the water inside can't get out to wither it. Kept cool and dry, it just sleeps. Let it get warm or wet, and it wakes right up and sprouts or molds. Put one up with a thick green neck still on it, or a nick cut in the rind, and that's the exact spot it rots from. And one bad squash will take the whole shelf with it. And don't you store your onions right by your apples either. The apple gives off something that'll set the onions sprouting. Ma kept a rope of onions braided on a nail by the kitchen door the year round and pulled one down whenever the pot wanted it. Number 5, the everlasting croc. Here's a sweet one and a neighborly one. The women kept a crock going the whole summer long that never emptied out and never spoiled, and they'd hand a start of it around the holler like it was a secret worth keeping. You begin it with the first fruit of the year, strawberries say, a pound of fruit, a pound of sugar, and a good splash of brandy or whiskey into a crock with a lid. Then as each fruit came ripe through the season, you added it in, cup for cup with more sugar, and stirred it down under. Strawberries, then cherries, then peaches, then plums, all summer without stopping. And the whole time it just sat there on the counter, no cold on it at all, working away sweet. They tell me it's 2 things guarding it at once. Sugar laid on so thick that nothing living can grow in it, and then the spirits on top of the sugar. Between the 2 of them, there's just no room left for anything to spoil. Understand, this wasn't a drink like the cider coming up. This was the whole fruit kept whole, to spoon warm over a cake come Christmas when there wasn't a fresh berry inside of 100 mile. Let the sugar run short though, or let the fruit rise up above the syrup and sit there dry in the air, and that's just where the mold takes its hold and you lose the crock. They called it the friendship crock, or a tutti frutti, and a new bride might get her start of it from her mother the same way she got a start of sourdough. I'll say this plain for safety's sake. Kept warm on a counter like that, it leaned on the sugar and the liquor heavy to stay safe. Do it in your own kitchen today. The guidance is to keep it cold or put it up properly canned. That's the sweet end of it done. The last 4 are the ones that took a real skill in the hand, the ones a careless body could truly get wrong. Number 4, hard cider, the orchard in a barrel. An apple's a fair keeper on a cellar shelf, but a tree drops more apples in 3 weeks than a family eats in 3 months, and the windfalls bruise and turn fast. So you didn't try to keep the apple, you kept the juice, by letting it change into a thing that couldn't rot. You ground the apples down to a pulp, the pomace, and pressed it in a screw press. A layer of pulp, a cloth, a layer, a cloth, built up in a stack, and then you screwed it down till the sweet cider ran out amber at the bottom. And then, mostly, you did nothing. You put it up in a clean oak barrel, left the bung loose, and let the wild yeast that lives on the apple skins go to work on its own. 2-3 weeks it worked and foamed and settled, and when it went quiet, it wasn't sweet cider anymore. It was hard, 4, 5, 6%, and it would keep in that barrel down the cellar clear through the spring. They tell me the yeast eats the sugar and gives back the alcohol, and it's the alcohol that stands guard over it, same as the liquor did in that fruit crock a minute ago. Nothing that could sicken a man lives in it once it's turned. And you want to understand, when the old people said cider, this hard kind is what they meant. Sweet cider was a thing you drank up in the 2 or 3 days you had it before it turned on its own. Leave the hard cider too long open to the air, mind, and it doesn't spoil so much as it keeps right on going. Clean past cider into vinegar, which, if it was vinegar you were wanting, was no loss at all. A cider press was a neighborhood day. Everybody's apples run through the one press. Pa had a barrel working in the cellar every fall of my boyhood, and the whole orchard was down in it. Number 3, making the cheese. Milk is about the most perishable thing on a farm. Sweet at the morning milking and turned by supper in July. The old way to save a summer flood of it was to turn it into a thing that would set quiet on a shelf for months. A cheese. A real pressed cheese, a wheel, not the soft clabber a body eats the same day. You warmed the milk and stirred in a little rennet, a piece of dried calf stomach, of all the things in this world, soaked out in water, and inside of an hour that whole pot of milk set up firm as a custard. You cut the curd into cubes, warmed it, and let it firm up, drained the whey off, salted it, and packed it down into a wooden hoop lined with a cloth. Then the press, a weight, a lever, a rock on a board, whatever you had, squeezing more whey out of it for a day and a night. You turned it out a wheel, rubbed it with lard, or dipped it in wax to seal the rind, and set it down in a cool cellar to age. Weeks, months, if you could keep your hands off it. They tell me it's the pressing out of the water and the salt and the drying of that rind all together. Take the water and the sweetness out of milk, and there's just nothing left for the spoiling to feed on. What's left only ages and grows better while it does. Press it wet, though, or seal that rind before it's good and dry, and it'll rot from the inside where you can't see a thing till you cut into it. And I'll note it plainly. The rule now for a raw milk cheese is to age it a full 60 days cold before you eat of it. The old-timers age theirs long anyhow, but 60 days is the standard, so know it. The last woman up our creek who could press a proper hoop cheese was in the ground before I ever married, and I never did learn the feel of it from her. You can buy a whole wheel of aged cheese today for about what a man's week of work used to be worth, and never once stopped to wonder how it was that milk ever learned to keep. The last two are the ones I turn over most in my mind. One you put up in a crock at hog killing, and one that wasn't a thing at all. It was people. Number 2, mincemeat, a winter in a crock. When the weather turned off cold enough to butcher, a family had more fresh meat on their hands at one time than they could ever eat before it spoiled, and no freezer anywhere to stop the clock on it. Mincemeat was one answer, and it's the cleverest of the whole lot because it doesn't lean on one keeper. It uses about every one of them at the same time. You took the tough meat, a deer's neck, a beef shin, and boiled it down tender and chopped it fine. Into a crock it went, and with it chopped apples and suet and sugar or a pour of molasses, and dried raisins and currants and a good slug of vinegar, and spice, and a pour of brandy or that hard cider. You packed it all down, ran a layer of melted suet over the top to seal it off from the air, put the lid on, and set it down in the cold cellar. They tell me it's every trick at once in the one crock. The sugar and the vinegar's sourness and the liquor and the fat cap over the top. No single one of them doing all the work, but all of them together leaving nothing for a rot to get any hold on. Belt and suspenders both. Let a spot go dry up above the syrup, though, or skimp the sugar and the sour, and it'll mold down at you from the top. And kept warm, it's a gamble. The word today is to can it or keep it cold, and that's fair. A crock of mincemeat put up at hog killing fed a family in pies clear on to spring. And it wasn't a poor man's pie either. It was the fine one, the Christmas one. Ma baked out of that crock till the last of the snow was gone off the ridge. Number 1, the neighbors, the beef ring. I've saved the finest icebox these mountains ever had for the last of it, and it wasn't a box. It wasn't a thing you could touch at all. Here's the trouble, it answered. A beef is a great lot of meat, 500-600 pound on the hoof, and one family cannot eat a whole beef before it spoils, not in the summer, and you cannot salt down and smoke the whole of it and still have anything left worth calling a fresh steak. So the mountains did a thing so simple that it's near forgotten now. They quit trying to keep the beef at all. They kept it moving instead. 20 families thereabouts would go in together on what they called a beef ring or a beef club. Every week through the warm months, one family in the ring killed a beef. It got cut up into 20 shares, and every family carried one home, fresh, that week. No keeping to it at all, because it'd be ate up in a few days' time. And the cuts came round in a turn. This week your family got the good roast. Next week your neighbor got it, and you took the boiling meat. And it evened out fair across the whole season. So nobody was cheated, and every soul in that ring ate fresh beef all summer long without one scrap of ice. The whole of the idea is this: there is no such thing as spoilage if the meat never sits still. 20 families sharing was a refrigerator built out of people. The cold you needed was just somebody else's supper the week coming. But it only ever held together on crust and on arithmetic. One family that didn't raise its beef when its week came round, or one man who kept a good cuts back for his own, and the ring broke, and everybody was thrown back on the smokehouse and the salt box. My people belonged to one when I was a boy. Butchering day came round to us like a chore and a holiday both. The men at the killing, us young ones running the wet showers out to the wagons. The last beef ring on our creek broke up sometime after the power lines came up the mountain, and the first families got a deep freeze humming on the back porch. And that right there is the part that's gone, and it's bigger than beef. The freezer didn't just cool the meat. It cooled the reason 20 families had to know each other's business and trust each other's honesty and show up of a Tuesday for somebody that wasn't kin. They kept their food from spoiling by keeping one another. We got the cold box, and we handed back the neighbors. And I'm not sure yet, all these years on, that it was a fair trade. Here's my challenge to you, and it's an easy one. Pick one, just the one. Cut a cabbage this fall and bury it in a straw-lined hole in high ground, and go dig it out at Christmas. Braid up a rope of onions and hang it in a dry room, or press a jug of cider and let it go hard in a cool corner, and taste for yourself what your great-grandfather actually drank of a morning. And tell me down below, did your people salt their beans down or string 'em up to dry? Did anybody in your family belong to a beef ring? And what county were they in? What did they call the croc the sweet fruit went in? I read 'em all. Every one of these was a whole science, worked out over 300 years by people who'd never once heard the word bacteria, and were dead right anyhow. And near all of it went into the ground with 'em, one old man and one old woman at a time. One thing before I go, and I'll only say it the once. Everything I know, everything on this channel, I'm putting in a book, sourced the way we do it here, every claim with where it comes from, so it's written down and checkable before the last of us takes it into the ground. If you want it, it's at EzraCade.com. That's the only time you'll hear me say it. They knew. Now it's written down.